This is from Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit upon his glorious throne, and all the nations will be assembled before him. And he will separate one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. A stranger, and you welcomed me. Naked, and you clothed me. Ill, and you cared for me. In prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him and say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison and visit you?" And the king will say to them in reply, "Amen, I say to you, whatever you did for me, for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Now, something that's recently that I've come to realize about Christianity and about the church in general is that for most of Christian history, the primary problem, the primary issue they had to deal with was the evil in the world. The main message the Christian community had to bear was a message of hope. Most people's lives were always lived on the edge of life and death. That was the way life was every day. Every day, the decisions you made were about whether or not you lived or died. And so people had a profound sense of what was on their shoulders, their survival of themselves and their families. But this weight crushed on them. I mean, it was a crushing weight. It was oppressive, this thought that everything rode on your shoulders. And every day they were scrounging, and they were fighting in war and famine and plague, and that was just the way life was for most people throughout history, and it's still that way for most of the people in the world. And so in that kind of context where darkness prevailed and where every moment was life or death, the Christian community was giving a message of hope that if you fight and you do well enough, at the end of this, there's something good, that there's a reward at the end for all this struggle. And so evil is going to be overcome by good, darkness overcome by light. This is the message of the Christian church. So everything the church did was about opposing the effects of evil on the soul of the individual. It was about giving hope. That's what the church was attenuated towards. So everything the church did, everything it said, was really about giving hope in a darkened world. And when it struggled theologically, its main struggle was with the problem of evil, because it had to explain the presence of these oppressive forces and these oppressive facts in a world ruled by a good God. When you're talking about hope, the message of a God who is ultimately in control, who is ultimately invulnerable, who vouchsafes your life, who creates safety and security in the world, this message probably becomes very important. It's the message people need to hear, at least to some degree. They need to know that the struggles that they're involved with are not ultimately the last word on the story of their lives, that there is hope. And a world that is ultimately ruled by God gives them hope. And so I think that was the primary problem throughout history, and I think that message is still important. It still has a place. I think the world's kind of shifted, especially in the West. I don't think the problem we face anymore is hopelessness so much. Most people can expect to live, roughly 75 years. That's a long time. Their life is not endless toil. That's not the nature of life for most people in the West. They have a lot of leisure time, and this leisure time, to some degree, represents the primary problem for the people of our day. Because people's lives don't feel very significant. The decisions you make are no longer life and death. And so the events of your life don't seem that important. Your continued existence is not dependent on whether you plow your field today, whether you kill that bear, whether you're drafted into this war. Life and death are not the nature of our struggles anymore. Today, our real struggles are about how we make the moments of our lives seem important. Robbed of the life or death aspect, many of our actions can often feel empty. They don't feel that important. So the modern problem for man is no longer really hope, it's meaning. People don't feel like their lives matter. They don't feel like what they do has any significance. This is the main problem, and I don't think the Christian church has properly reassigned or realigned itself to speak to this kind of problem. There have been some attempts with movements like the purpose-driven life, but I think ultimately those things don't stand up to intellectual scrutiny, so especially for intellectually sophisticated individuals, Christianity doesn't seem to offer anything when it comes to the question of meaning, the question of how do I make what I do feel important. And if you don't feel like what you're doing is important, ultimately you don't have anything to do. And so we as Christians need to pick up some other language from the Bible, not the language of a God that is, out there and over everything, but a God who is incarnate, a God who is within the world, and a God that we can affect, a God who makes himself vulnerable. The idea that what we do in this world ekes out an eternal significance, or like we're literally building our soul within God, that message, I think, gives people a sense that what they're doing is important. Every single little thing you do leaves the world with a greater or fainter impress of God, and every single thing you do leaves God with a greater or fainter impress of you. If we can think in terms of what we do to other people, we do to God, then every act, whether it's an act of life or death, is an act of suffering or freedom for God. So if everything you do either makes God suffer or frees God, that's infinitely significant. That really starts to solve the problem by speaking to a sense of what we do mattering, what we do having significance, what we do having purpose. I think that's why I chose that passage for today, because then, what you do to the least of these, you do to me. Well, then your actions in this world, however seemingly insignificant, have an ultimate significance because they're visited upon the life of God. We need to claim the language of, inculcating or of doing for God, and doing for God being something that actually changes God or has some effect on God. God not being this invulnerable, beyond reality that we can't possibly have any effect on. The idea of our actions being effective in God's life can finally start to turn the Christian church, I think, in the direction that the 21st century needs, which is purpose and meaning and value, which can help people lead to happiness. I think this is the cause of, a lot of the horrors that you have these common people going out and doing these horrible things, these school shootings and stuff. I think that they're trying to reclaim a sense of doing things that have life or death significance. So when they hold somebody's life in their hand, it gives them a sense of what they're doing actually mattering. But there's another way, there's an alternative way we can achieve the sense that what you do has ultimate significance, and that's to claim the idea of an incarnate God, to really fully understand what it means to say that Jesus Christ is God, and to see in that vulnerability the key to purpose. And that's what the incarnation is all about for me. Amen.